What's the history behind the poetic form? Poetry is a literary genre that uses phonoaesthetics, sound symbolism, and meter, among other aesthetic and rhythmic language features, to evoke meanings in addition to or instead of the apparent prosaic meaning. This was significant in ancient history when there was no or less access to record writing to pass down the story, and rituals were coupled with dancing and repetitions of melodies, making it memorable and enduring for generations and protecting the culture's history and values. No, truly, for the truest poetry is the most feigning, and lovers are given to poetry, and what they swear in poetry may be said as lovers do they feign. William Shakespeare. Poetry has a long history dating back to prehistoric times, with the creation of hunting poetry in Africa to rhetoric and panegyric and elegiac court poetry were developed extensively throughout the history of the empires of the Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, Indian subcontinent, China, Greece, Rome, and Scandinavia. There are different types of poetry such as sonnets, ghazals, haikus, ballads, etc. Each type has a specific form that needs to be followed. For example, a sonnet is a 14-line poem usually written in iambic pentameter. There is also the more popular form in recent times, free verse. It's a type of poetry that does not follow specific rules, although it still involves all the elements that make up the form of a poem, including diction, syntax, lineation, stanza, rhythm, and the many different types of rhyme. It's just that there aren't any rules governing how they must be used. Western culture has been greatly influenced by poetry, although it holds a different prominence than various prose genres like fantasy, science fiction, romance, and visual arts like movies and video games. How to choose a form for your poem. When choosing a form for your poem, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, consider the purpose of your poem. What are you trying to communicate? Once you know the purpose, you can narrow down your options. For example, a haiku might be the best choice if you want to write a short and sweet love poem. A sonnet might be a better option if you want to write about complex subject matter. After you have considered the purpose of your poem, it's time to look at the different types of forms available. Some common poetic forms include sonnets, haikus, villanelles, sestinas, and ghazals. Each formal form has its own set of rules regarding things like meter and rhyme schemes. Choose one that feels right for your poem. Then find ways to inject figurative language and literary devices that add depth to a poem without affecting its essence. Poetry and beauty are always making peace. When you read something beautiful, you find coexistence. It breaks walls down. Mahmoud Darwish. Finding the best language for the poem is the objective of the stage. If you are an aspiring poet, choose a well-known form such as a haiku, sonnet, or common meter to teach you how to arrange the poem. As you gain experience, it will come naturally to you to break the rules and experiment with different parts of the figure of speech or repetition of sounds that resonate best with the poem. If you are working on an existing poem, decide if it works well in free verse, choose a form that best delivers the message or mix elements of different forms. If it's new, which form best suits its style, texture, and tone of language. Sometimes it fits a particular form's original design, for instance, Petrarch's sonnet, usually about unrequited love. The poem, Grateful, in the book The Cool and Warmth of Hearts. For this poem, I took inspiration from William Shakespeare's famous sonnet, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? And Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem, How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. Both are about love and praising someone and are written as sonnets. For Grateful, I chose the Italian sonnet form, which starts with a proposition, usually a problem, and ends with a resolution. The speaker is thanking and praising someone of immense value, not just to them, but to others as well. And in the volta, which is called turn, they ask how they can repay them. In response, the speaker decides that marriage is one of the best ways to repay them both here and in the afterlife. I'm grateful she has appeared in my life, and the former disappeared with my strife. Adore the traits that enhance her beauty, with many aspects shown through her duties. Kindness and troves to inspire authors, gather to furnace the art and honor, awaiting the gleam on their gleeful faces, while light shimmers and bounds in her tresses. Sturdy like a turtle, steady by time, sublime in the soul, sang of her springtime. How virtue invites the vine to us, and ceases to ravish inside of us. How can I repay in equal amount? Marriage suffices, and all lives will surmount. If you're someone who loves to read my entire poetry writing process with examples, then you can check out my free download, where I provide the following. I provide the entire poetry writing process with an example poem published in my book, The Cool and Warmth of Hearts, from start to finish. I provide this in several formats for free, such as a PDF and JPEG with an infographic. Lastly, the Google Doc template I use for every poem can be downloaded in other formats as well, so you can find the link in the description below, and I hope you enjoy it. The gist. When it comes to writing poetry, there are many different poetic forms to choose from. While some writers prefer to stick to one form, others enjoy experimenting with various forms to see what works best. There are benefits to both approaches. The main benefit for writers who prefer sticking to one form is that they become very proficient. This can lead to a stronger understanding of the form's rules and conventions, leading to a more creative and innovative use of the form. Additionally, sticking to one form can help the writer develop a signature style that readers will recognize and appreciate. On the other hand, writers who enjoy experimenting with different forms may find that they can express themselves in more unique ways. Trying out different forms helps the writer understand the rules and conventions of each form more deeply. Poetry is a literary genre that uses phonesthetics, sound symbolism, and meter, among other aesthetics and rhythmic language features, to evoke meanings in addition to or instead of the apparent prosaic meaning. There are different types of poetry such as sonnets, ghazals, haikus, ballads, and etc. Each type has a specific form that needs to be followed. For example, a sonnet is a 14-line poem usually written in iambic pentameter. There are also more popular forms in recent times. Free verse is a type of poetry that does not follow specific rules, although it still involves the elements that make up the form of a poem, including diction, syntax, lineation, stanza, rhythm, and the many different types of rhyme. It's just that there aren't any rules governing how they must be used. When choosing a form for your poem, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, consider the purpose of your poetry. What are you trying to communicate? Once you know the purpose, you can narrow down your options. For example, a haiku might be the best choice if you want to write a short and sweet love poem. A sonnet might be a better option if you want to write about complex subject matter. The next video of the poetry writing process will cover inspiration.